What a full Sunday evening on the East Central Plains of Kansas, and you are joining us for Sunday Night Prime Time in the number. Just finished our bracketology. Boomer Takes with Pete and Jake here on 2103.7 FM. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm actually talking to you from Overland Park, our Kansas City suburb, where I am here at the Auto University campus at Overland Park. I've got my longtime friend, Dr. Tinsman, here with us. And
hello, John. Good evening.
Yes, Pete, it's so great to have you back. And what is with this? I think we are now officially in springtime because we went from 80 degrees Fahrenheit Monday to 94 degrees Fahrenheit just the other day, to recap Friday, and that was March 20, the first day of spring. Pete, spring has sprung. Now, you matriculate between the Quad Cities of Iowa, and what's your temps been like? Because we're going to talk a little bit about springtime stuff today, too.
Well, I was actually in Iowa over this past week visiting family, and Friday was gorgeous there. It was sunny, 75, light breeze. It was perfect. In Florida, it's been cooler, actually. It's been in the 70s this past week. And so, yeah, I mean, it's nice. A week and a half ago, I was skiing. I was out in Breckenridge, and snow was no good, and it was warm. And the end of this past week, it was in the mid to upper 50s. So mountain snow is not, holding up well out there. And I think Colorado's going to have a significant problem this summer if they don't get a ton of rain this spring.
Guys, climate is something that we all keep our attention on. I always get a spring in my step when spring hits, Pete, and I always think of doing outdoor work. I'm looking at my yard. We're already green here in Kansas. My lawn has been green all winter. It's a definite phenomenon, different from my Omaha and Cedar Rapids and Des Moines days. And also, I think about the Masters golf tournament. I've been very nostalgic looking at old Masters reels. Remember watching those with my dad. It seems like yesterday when Jack Nicklaus at 46 won that great miraculous major at Augusta with his comeback for his sixth green jacket. And Pete, that was 40 years ago. And it's not lost on me, Pete. I get further nostalgic for the 80s and 90s. And now, with all of these icons of my childhood and youth and early adulthood going, my lovely bride, Deborah, our first chemistry spark flew at the Carter Lake Kegger in 1981 when I asked her to dance. When I asked her to dance with me to Neil Sedaka's "Breaking Up Is Hard to Do," and I didn't realize what a genius I was because I thought it was the fast-paced 50s bebop hit that he had, but they actually played the remix that he did in the early 80s where he slowed it down. So I ended up getting a slow dance when I thought it was going to be a fast dance. Neil Sedaka passed away just a week after I was watching him singing and building out tunes with his grandkids at the piano. He looked great at 86, and poof, he was gone. And then the other day, really a dagger in my heart, Chuck Norris. Oh, my goodness. Pete, literally, Dr. Tinsman, literally, I was watching an Instagram of him several days ago, a week ago, celebrating his 86th birthday. He was working out with a punching bag. He says, "I don't age, I level up," and he looked great. Pete, you're a doctor. Sedaka and Norris looked great. I literally was interacting with their Instagram videos a week before they died. They both looked great. Pete, what happens? They were both 86. Sometimes is that you just wear out at 86?
John, I know exactly what happened to them. Their hearts stopped.
Go for it. Well, there you have it. That's why we pay with the big bucks, Dr. Tinsman. That's why we pay with the big bucks.
My mom's got significant dementia, and if I had a choice to be living an extra 8-10 years and not being who I normally would be, or dying suddenly at 85, 86, still working on a punching bag, I'll take the 85, 86 thing any day.
Yeah, it reminded me.
Any day.
Yeah, I think my wife would say the same thing. She had a father who died of a massive heart attack at 56 at a football game coming out of the stadium. He hit the ground, and that was it at 56. She had a mother. She had a mother, though, who went through a 10-year brutal battle with dementia and Alzheimer's. And Deb will tell you to this day that her dad had the right idea. My mom right now could run General Motors. She's going to be 90 this August, God willing, but her body is failing her. She's not ambulatory at all. She can hardly walk. And yet I have these beacons of hope. Literally next weekend, William Shatner, who celebrates his 95th birthday, literally, it was, let's see, today, the 22nd, is William Shatner's 95th birthday. He's supposed to be in Kansas City next week signing autographs and taking pictures at the Comic-Con convention here in Kansas City. He just had shoulder surgery after being thrown off his horse. He's riding a horse at 94, Pete.
He got thrown off. My wife gets mad. I'm 64. I'm 64.
I know.
And my wife gets mad at me that I'm riding a horse. And she's like, you should not be on your horse. I say, he's good. She goes, why does he get thrown off? I'm going to tell her the William Shatner story.
Now, the countervailing story to that was when you and I were in school together, Ronald Reagan had a great Commerce Secretary, Malcolm Mack Baldrige. He was a great Wyoming guy. And they recessed one weekend. Everybody went back home. And Mack Wallop was riding his horse. His horse fell on him and crushed him to death. And we lost our Secretary of Commerce under Reagan due to a horse accident.
Wow.
But so what is it that makes a guy like
that, John?
Well, Pete, what is it that makes a guy like William Shatner? I mean, if you see him, he gave a speech without notes at the Saturn Awards 2 weeks ago, right before he went in for surgery. He was cogent. He was quick-witted. He was phenomenal. He stood up. He didn't have a cane. He's walking without assistance, and he talks about stuff that happened 60, 70 years ago. Is it just the genes that Shatner has, maybe from his Ashkenazi ethnic background, possibly? They do have longevity there.
Yeah, I think genetics plays a huge part. It does, and when you look at his age and talk about food that he was exposed to when he was younger, growing up. I mean, there wasn't all this junk that they currently put in stuff now.
Yeah, exactly.
And all that makes a difference. But obviously you can have great genes, but if you do not take good care of yourself, don't eat, don't exercise, those genes are only going to help you so much. So it's a combination of both.
Well, Pete, you've swerved into something I wanted to talk about. Perfect segue here. So I'm at this economic conference here at Ottawa University, and we're talking about how government meddles in things and sometimes makes things worse. And we talked about how we're the nation that has this fructose corn syrup instead of sugar in all of our stuff, and how bad that is for us. If you go to Mexico or another country to get a soda pop, you don't have all that fructose corn syrup. And yet we have here this huge lobby, and a lot of them are our ag members, our farmers, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska. They want ethanol, they want corn syrup, and we're at this juxtaposition here where we've got this fight going on. RFK Jr. Rightly wants to get off this bad fructose corn syrup, and yet you've got a lot of economic interests militating Trump not to go that route. But the reason we can't do it is because we literally have had historically, and I generally like the Trump tariff policies, but historically we've had such huge tariffs on sugar. Sugar's too expensive here. That's why these guys are using the fructose corn syrup. Talk about this and talk about the differences between these materials and our health.
Well, the high fructose corn syrup, you got to also keep in mind there's another component to it, too. The other component is 98% of the corn that's planted in this country is Roundup ready. So it's
bingo. Talk to our audience.
So spray with Roundup, and from the farmer's standpoint, obviously Roundup has been a huge help for them to keep the weeds out of the fields, and that all improves the yield. And we're finding out more and more over the years that maybe this isn't a good deal. So, you talk to the farmers, you say, okay, you're planting Roundup ready corn and beans, trying to help keep the weeds down and that sort of thing. But okay, so now we're finding out maybe this isn't the safest for us. Well, what do the farmers have to say? It's like, how much would they, and I don't know the answer to this question, but how much would their yield drop off?
I talked to one the other day, and I said maybe Roundup wasn't the best thing we've ever done. And boy, Pete, I got pushback. It's just these competing interests here.
And I think of business that my father and his brother started, in ag fertilizers, years ago, and my brother now works and runs the business with my cousins, and we were talking about pesticides and insecticides or herbicides, and could we move away from some of those? He goes, we could, but it hurts the yields for the farmer, and that the farmer doesn't get good yields now. They're not going to make money, and in farming already, that's a tough business. These guys have to be very knowledgeable in agronomy, and they also have to be wonderful businessmen as well. And you go cutting into their profits and their yields, and boy, we got a problem. And so I don't know. I really don't know what the answer is. It would be really great if we could have a farmer on the show sometime.
I think we'll pull that in. I think we'll bring in our friend. We'll bring in our friend Bill Proct from the great ethanol plant, East Kansas Energy. We will do that, guys. Can you believe we're already, guys? We're at 10-minute warning. Real quickly, we'll do station identification here. I can't believe how fast our time goes. You're listening to KOFO. Boomer Takes with Pete and Jake on 1220 103.7 FM. Your home and away voice of the Kansas City Royals, caroming all throughout the East Central Plains of Kansas. Your country music giant, and Franklin, Lynn, Anderson, Miami Osage, Johnson, and Douglas counties. We've got the KC suburbs listening in, as well as our legislative folks in Topeka, our Rock Chalk Jayhawks from up in Lawrence, just 15 minutes up north of here, as well as Wellsburg and Williamsburg and Osage and Osawatomie and Gardner and Garnett City and Princeton and Paola and Baker City and Emporia up by the Wildcats, and here in Wellsville. Back to you, Pete. We'll bring this farmer on. You continue where you left off.
Well, no, I think it would be very interesting, from an educational standpoint, is that let's hear what the ethanol guy has to say, but let's hear what the farmer has to say as well.
Exactly.
It really, I think it's certainly in RFK Jr. is certainly bringing this to the forefront. That I think we're kind of at a pivotal moment here.
Yep.
And,
we are.
I think the majority of people realize there's too much junk and chemicals in our food that it's hurting us. When I was in Iowa last week, I saw something. Was either the TV was on or something? I read it that Iowa has the second highest cancer rate in the country.
Yes, absolutely true.
And so why is that? Is it because of all? I'm
going to give you a hint. That's some of it, but actually, Pete, what they're indicating, I've seen some of the farmers brush back and say the incidence of cancers is much higher in the urban areas than in the rural areas. And there are some that would say the water quality is an issue as well. So I personally believe, just based on anecdotal experience, I personally believe that the high incidence of cancers are related to some of the ag pesticides and chemicals. Just from what I saw in the rural town where I raised my family for 20-some years, there was such a high incidence of cancers, and even young children with like cerebral palsies or things like that it just seemed to skew way beyond what the normal population would have been, Pete.
And the pushback, you got, it's urban areas. Okay, look at the urban area. Look at the urban lifestyle. More exposed to, let's say, smog and, pollutants. Or maybe people who live urban lifestyles are more prone to eat more highly processed foods, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But, chemicals, is it fair to say that none of the chemicals make it down into the water table? No, they've got to make it into the water table.
Yeah,
exactly.
They have
to. And to a certain degree, but
people have said.
Did I ever tell you why I got into raising honeybees?
No. Talk about this. This is a great segue.
So This is back in 2012, 13, something like that. I'd read this article in a psychology journal, and they had done a study where they had 6 beehives, and one beehive was given just sugar water, so the bees could feed on that. The other 5 were given sugar water laced with Roundup, and the amount of Roundup that was put into that sugar water was less than the cutoff that the EPA or the FDA said was safe for human consumption or exposure.
Okay.
The only hive that survived was the beehive that had no exposure to the Roundup. Every other beehive, those hives collapsed. And their theory was because Roundup is a neurotoxin.
Yes.
They figured it either 1, killed the bees, or 2, it messed up their internal GPS, such that when they flew out to go find pollen, they couldn't find their way back to the hive. That was their assumption. And, like in a lot of studies, they said further studies have to be done in order to see if this truly, it does correlate and that sort of thing. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to start raising bees.
Pete, there are theories out there that all of the use of the chemical birth control pills and how that ultimately ends up in our water supply through urine and discharge and whatnot is part of the reason why the testosterone and fertility levels have so decreased among the male population in the United States.
Well, I guess you could certainly argue that, but you could also say, what else is there? What else is going on in society? What else are we being exposed to that's affecting, adverse?
What are some of the other destroyers of male fertility? That it's shocking.
Plastic.
The decline from 50 years ago. It's shocking degradation of male fertility.
Microplastics and everything. Look at I get a biggest kick out of this. You go to Colorado and you go to the grocery store and they charge you 10 cents for a plastic bag, but everything you buy is wrapped in plastic.
Yes.
And it's like, and there's all sorts of studies out there showing that, people, you do autopsies and they find microplastics up in the brain that it just gets past.
Dr. Tinsman, MD, just a reminder, Pete is an MD. Dr. Tinsman, I have heard that monthly every American is subject to basically the equivalent of a credit card of plastic ingestion from microplastics. So if you solidified it, it would be a credit card. Yeah, incredible to think about.
When you
so
think
that
about
obviously,
and the plastic, it disrupts our endocrine system, our hormone system. So
exactly.
It really is. We have to do something. I think
we're being bombarded. We're being bombarded by oxidative stresses that prior generations have not been subject to. I think we can say that. Would that be a true statement?
I think that is 100% correct. And you get all these reactive oxidative species that develop in our body that then affects the mitochondria, which is a little powerhouse of all of our cells. That it doesn't produce as well. And you step back 5 years ago or 6, whatever it was, to COVID, I was convinced that people who got really sick were people who had the mitochondria, that energy power plant of the cell, it just wasn't healthy enough. And the people who got
I agree, Pete.
Just their body just could not handle it because their mitochondria had been damaged from what? Lifestyle. Food. Whatever.
I agree. I agree 1,000,000%, Dr. Tinsman. That's why Deb and I take a glutathione precursor daily. We take the ProImmune Formulation 200. It's a glutathione precursor that gets to the cellular level and then allows the cells, it gives them that impetus to manufacture that glutathione, which we need.
Well, and John, the thing to keep in mind, and they have all these supplements out there and things like that, and I take that stuff too. But if we had really good, healthy, whole foods to eat, we wouldn't need any of these supplements.
Bingo. What you said is correct.
You wouldn't need, if we had the food that was around 100 years ago, you wouldn't need supplements. And if you ate a well-balanced diet, you wouldn't need it.
Two and a half years ago, when I met Bobby Kennedy Jr. at the Iowa State Fair and interviewed him while he was running for president, I started on this trek. Yes, he did. He did. And Bobby gave a great speech there. But as I talked with him, I realized he gets it. These are his issues. He is hitting these hard. And it's incredible to me. He's had such an array of big lobby groups against him, but President Trump, to his credit, has given Bobby free rein to use his discretion, and obviously Bobby's not winning on every battle. What was it? The glucophosphate?
Glyphosate?
What was it?
That's Roundup.
The glyphosate, yeah.
Glyphosate
Bobby Kennedy lost on that issue. He wanted that banned, and Trump allows Roundup, the glyphosate. But Bobby's won a ton of battles, including in the diet, in foods, and he's eliminating mercury from vaccines. The list of RFK Jr. accomplishments is as long as your arm. It's really impressive.
And I just saw in the news last week that it sounds like some judge has blocked his alteration. He wants to alter the childhood vaccine schedule.
That judge. Yeah, that was a rogue judicial ruling. It's bad law, will be easily overturned. And the judge had no authority to do that. So total violation of separation of powers. You do have some of these rogue judicial appointees from Obama that are trying to circumvent constitutionally the powers of the executive branch and the legislative branch. It's a great catch, Pete. That's exactly what happened. That will be overturned within a fortnight.
Yeah. I think would be fun some evening, John, is to have a Democrat and Republican come on and give their viewpoints on some of these different things.
We will do that. I've got many friends from both sides of the aisle.
Yeah. I mean, just a nice, gentle conversation, which really typically doesn't happen anymore. I mean, it should.
I've got some really good Democrat
when
friends.
We were 25 years old, nobody really cared if somebody was a Democrat or Republican. Everybody's like, okay, fine,
No. And I got a lot of great friends who are Dems that I served with or who are lobbyists in the legislature. I'll bring one of them on, and one of my fellow Republican confreres. It'd be a great conversation. I mean, that's how we did it in the old days. We were still friends, and we talked to each other. I can't believe some of my social media friends that they can't be my friend anymore because they disagree with me. John Kennedy and Barry Goldwater were at total opposite ends of the political spectrum. They were such good friends. They were going to campaign together in the same plane in the 1964 presidential election until JFK was tragically killed. And Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill used to go out for beers after bruising legislative battles. Pete, we need to get back to that, man.
I think we absolutely need to get back to that. It would make things... I think we need to get back to that. I think we also need to challenge all these major media outlets to do nothing but give positive news for a month and see if the attitude of the country changes.
Agreed, Pete. We haven't gone into the war yet over in the Middle East, but I'll say this. Most of the media coverage on Twitter is fake news or AI-generated videos and bots. I cannot believe the propaganda disinformation campaign that is going on. It is, you cannot believe anything that you see or read because so much of it is disinformation put out by different sides, including bots and fake videos. It's unbelievable, Pete. We never had to deal with this in our day and age.
No, and and obviously that confuses everybody.
Including
me.
Including me.
You talk about, Iran, and it's kind of like, really, what's the real story there? What's the true story with America and Israel and Iran?
I'll give you a classic case point. You had Arab media putting out videos supposedly of Tel Aviv getting shelled and drilled by Iranian rockets. No, it was actually Western Allied rockets going into Iran and doing damage there, or from an earlier excursion of changing up of weaponry, but it was not in Israel. It was not anything that hit Tel Aviv, and yet this propaganda is out there to make it look like, Iran did some damage, and Iran's done next to zero damage. I think the Israelis have only suffered maybe a handful of fatalities during all of the shelling. They've done very little damage other than to buildings in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. And you're right, you can't believe everything you see. I have an old saying, Pete, every word the media says is a lie, including and the. I'll give you the final word here because we're up on our half hour. I can't believe it, Dr. Tinsman.
Final word, I say we all need to pray for peace and that everybody gets along and let the good people run the world and get the bad people out.
I love it, Dr. Tinsman. And
I don't know how else to say. I don't know.
It's beautiful. And let me ask you this, one final thing here. You spend a lot of time in Florida. Florida is one of the teams predicted to win the national championship here, go to the Final Four. And you're also an Iowa boy, and the Hawkeyes, both men and women, are looking strong. Are you following the tournament at all, or are you keeping busy with other things?
I'm keeping busy with other things. And this is, I'm pretty much I'm kind of atypical. I don't really care. It doesn't really I got other things I'm more interested in. And,
well, it's better for your heart not to be with the cardiac Hawkeyes, because they can really make your heart skip a beat,
As the guy who cut my lawn down here in Florida, he was from Hungary, and he actually ran for the Hungarian Senate.
Wow.
He lost by a handful of votes, but really, really smart guy, immigrated to the United States and had a long business. As he said, he goes, Americans are too concerned about where they're shopping, where they're going out to eat, and what sporting event or team they're following or getting involved with, and understanding what's going on in the world. And he goes, Americans need to wake up. And I was just like, oh, really? And
it's the idea of don't get all caught up in don't get caught up in bread and circuses like ancient Rome to diverge everybody. But I do have to say that people here love their Kansas Jayhawks. The Jayhawks won that first round, and we'll see what happens just up the road here. Fog Allen Fieldhouse, no venue quite like it. No discussion I rather have during the week than with my buddy Pete Tinsman, Dr. Tinsman. Pete?
Hey, and John, one last thing, since we have a lot of rural ag people probably listening.
We do.
Was at the John Deere headquarters, the museum, the pavilion on Thursday, or was it Friday? No, Wednesday.
Wow.
This past Wednesday, and there was a brand new I think it was an S9 combine. I don't know how much that thing was, but it was beautiful. But if anybody's listening who has one of those, I would love and come and ride in it with you if you buy one.
All right, guys, phone in, call Jake, and we'll have Dr. Tinsman up here riding in that brand new combine. Pete, it's so great to have you on. This show is picking up a lot of popularity. It's moved into the number 2 slot after our sports lead intro on Sunday Night Prime here on KOFO. I want to thank Sean Torres, our great studio engineer, for putting this all together. For Dr. Pete Tinsman, this is John Jacobson saying stay tuned for the rest of our great programming lineup. In the meantime, be safe, be smart, be good, be strong. We are now over halfway to Easter, Resurrection Sunday. It is Lent. Give thanks and praise to Jesus Christ for all of his blessings and his mercies. And God bless us, everyone. Pick up the podcast on KOFO.com. Until we meet again, bye-bye.